Hello everyone, Ladislas Maurice from The Wandering Investor here. So I'm at Istanbul Airport. I've just spent 2 weeks here in Istanbul looking at real estate, looking at the Citizenship by Investment program, meeting with lawyers, agents, other investors, friends of mine. So great time here in Istanbul. I did an economic analysis of the situation in Turkey. Feel free to read the article. The link is below in the description. But in this video, I'm just going to be discussing real estate in Istanbul. So it's important to note that real estate hasn't been doing fantastic in real terms over the past few years. Inflation has been, in nominal terms, the numbers are fantastic, but once you take into account inflation and the CPI index, then the returns have been relatively paltry. Since 2020, prices have started booming again, both in nominal terms and in real terms. And this is through a period where the lira suffered quite a bit. It started off approximately at 6 liras to the dollar, then it plunged to 8.5 to the dollar, and now it's back up to 7 liras to the dollar. So a very volatile currency, which is a key factor to take into account when buying here in Turkey. Again, I wrote this in my article on the economy. So prices in Istanbul, for the first time in many years, are now rising again in USD terms. And we'll discuss this a bit later, but it's still possible to find property in near prime locations for less than $1,000 a square meter. So I don't know how long these deals are gonna last, to be honest with you. One of the big questions when you decide to invest in Istanbul is whether you want to invest on the European side or on the Anatolian side, the Asian side. I like all the large infrastructure projects happening on the European side. So one, there's the massive new airport that's been built. I'm here right now, brand new, huge, unlike anything you could even ever dream of finding in Europe, anywhere else in Europe. And the government is planning on building a large canal, a new canal to replace the Bosphorus. So there are two reasons for this. One is environmental. You have close to 50,000 ships that are passing the Bosphorus on a yearly basis, which is a big risk. And secondly, because there was an international treaty that was signed with regards to the Bosphorus, the government can't actually charge fees for ships going through. With the new canal, the government should be able to charge for each ship going through that canal. So it would be an interesting revenue-making scheme and would consolidate Turkey's power when it comes to the Black Sea and the whole region. So those are two projects, one that's been completed, the other one that is going to start pretty soon, that are going to attract jobs and logistics companies. It's going to attract manufacturing as well. So a lot of the things that get done physically, as in real jobs, there's going to be a lot of growth on the European side. In terms of the Anatolian side, to be honest with you, I spent less time on that side looking at it. There's a large international finance center which is being built. It's been delayed many times, but it looks as if it's going to open in 2022. The Turkish Central Bank is to move its headquarters there. The banking regulator as well. Many of the large private and public banks are going to shift their headquarters to that new financial center. So there'll probably be good growth around that area as well. Overall, I find the case for the European side to be more compelling. And when I say this, I'm definitely not saying don't look at the Asian side. I'm just saying the bigger picture seems a bit less bullish on that end. But for sure, if you look around, I'm sure you can find pockets of very interesting growth stories. So now the question is, which neighborhoods should you invest in on the European side? So Istanbul is massive. We're talking of a city of 15 million people. By European standards, it's probably the biggest, bigger than London, bigger than Paris. So it's not simple. In many ways, Istanbul is a collection of different cities. But here we can have a look at a map of the European part of Istanbul. So I highlighted the areas that I find interesting, the other areas that I find less so. We'll start with a big one at the bottom left, which is Sultan Ahmed. It's in red, so I wrote it's overpriced only for tourists. So essentially that's where you find the Hagia Sophia. So lovely area, beautiful, but the reality is locals don't really want to live there. It's become a bit of a tourist central. So, like slightly overpriced restaurants for mediocre food, like carpet shops and tacky touristy shops. So it's a bit of a Disneyland, and the prices are pretty high. So I'd say this is like one trap that people fall into when they come into Istanbul. They say, I want to buy near the Hagia Sophia because Hagia Sophia, it's great, but that's not where you're going to get good returns. Another one is the famous Taksim. Anyone that goes to Istanbul will invariably end up at Taksim at some point. It's the touristy and artistic and shopping center of Istanbul. There are a few other little neighborhoods around like Cihangir and Galata that are quite nice. But what you find is that the prices are okay and yields are also okay. You can, if you're lucky, you can find a good deal. So I'd say it's like a middle range investment between yields and capital growth. It's a pretty safe investment in that area. Then there's Beşiktaş, which is widely known for its football team. It's an interesting case study because prices are relatively high, but the yields are low as well. So as a foreign investor, not very attractive. Then there's Nişantaşı, which is really the most premium area. It's where you find, the Louis Vuitton store, the Gucci shop. It's where you find all the designer shops, the cool bars, cool restaurants. Actually a really nice place to hang out. Turks with money want to live in Nişantaşı. So that's a very safe bet. You're probably not going to get the highest yields. Actually, you won't. It'll do well over the long run. It's a safe way to play Istanbul if that's what you're looking for. The areas I preferred the most were Kurtuluş, Bomonti, and the whole Osman Bey area. What I like about it is that it's originally fairly working class, but because it's so close to Nişantaşı, there's starting to be a spillover. So a few years ago, I've been coming to Istanbul on a regular basis, and until a few years ago, the whole area, there wasn't much happening there. It's just normal people living. But now you go there, cool little restaurants are popping up, little, cool bars. So it's really up and coming, but it's actually up and coming, not like up and coming like real estate agents often try to sell crappy areas. If you're lucky enough, you can find apartments for less than $1,000 a square meter in that area. You'll need to renovate, but renovation costs are, approximately $250 to $350 a square meter for some quality renovation. And you can get those, that's where you get the highest yields actually. So you can get yields of 5.5, even 6% if you stretch it gross. Now, this is the secondary market, and this is what I find attractive. So I did a video with my friend Brian on the scams that you should avoid with regards to Istanbul real estate. Typically, it's all these new builds that are being marketed in English with great websites. You send them an email, within 3 minutes they're calling you and you tell them you're flying in Istanbul. They'll have a driver pick you up and take you to all these places. So the service is great, but the reality is you are overpaying, like substantially overpaying, and you're going to get some very low yields. And typically these investments are either far away from the center, so lower liquidity, or they're in the center, but they're these like overpriced luxury towers. You won't get your money back really. You're going to invest in that, and as soon as you buy it, you're probably down 20-30%, and then you can just hope for capital appreciation to get your capital back. So I'd really avoid those. The deals are in the secondary market by having a good agent who is able to go find them for you, because it's not an easy market to navigate if you don't speak Turkish. I was lucky enough to be contacted by Keith a few months ago. So he's from Nova Scotia, from Canada. He's been living in Istanbul for many years, and he's a buyer's agent, and he specializes in helping people find such deals in up-and-coming neighborhoods. So feel free to look at, I did a few videos with them. It'll give you a really good idea of what you can expect if you invest in secondary market Istanbul property. And you can just get in touch with them if you're interested. Taxes in Turkey are moderate to high. It's definitely not a place you move to avoid taxes. That said, taxes are still lower than in most of Western Europe. Then again, you'll ask me what is more expensive than Western Europe in terms of taxes. Probably nowhere. So the personal income tax varies from 15% to 40%. If you buy real estate for about $250,000, $300,000 in an upcoming area and you get your 5.5 to 6% yield, you'll end up paying approximately 20% taxes after having deducted all your expenses. So it's, not cheap, but it's also not the end of the world. Property taxes are low. Expect to pay about 0.2% of the assessed value of your property, which is typically lower than what you'll have paid for. So again, the property tax, really not a big deal. And when you purchase property, there's the equivalent of a stamp duty tax of about 4%. It can be shared between the buyer and the seller, 50-50, but it all comes down to negotiations. So sometimes it's only the buyer that pays, sometimes it's split 50-50. So it really depends on your negotiation skills and the particular situation at hand. There's VAT on some units, but typically foreigners don't have to pay. The first property that foreigners buy is VAT exempt, and then if you buy properties with less than 150 square meters, it's like, I think, just 1%. You don't really have to worry about this too much. Also, what's important to note is that the risk of earthquakes in Istanbul is high, so this should be a consideration when you purchase property. So there are a few maps around showing the seismic risk of the various neighborhoods. I personally would just avoid the completely red areas. That's just spelling trouble. But essentially everyone is obliged to have earthquake insurance in Turkey. So you're at least covered. And what you find is there was an earthquake recently in Izmir, and what you find is that the buildings that collapse are very shabby buildings from the 70s, from the 80s, or even some new builds from the 90s that weren't according to the law. Newer buildings generally follow the stricter rules, so that's fine, and older buildings are sturdier. So when you invest in some neighborhoods, just make sure to get a quality building. Generally, if it's something that was built in the 60s or before, you're safer. Look, overall, I find Istanbul a very attractive proposition. So it's not the sort of market where you go in and you just make a killing, you get like very high yields, unlike what you can get in Ukraine these days. It's a market where, one, the whole citizenship deal is, honestly, it's the best citizenship by investment program there is. You just invest $250K of normal real estate and you get citizenship for nearly free. I made a video on this. Fees are minimal. It's pretty quick to get it. So that's very attractive. But just even the real estate itself, when you take a step back and you see the city of 15 million people at the crossroads of Europe, the Middle East, Asia, even Africa, growth is moving to this part of the world. Like it or not, power is shifting from the North Atlantic to the East. So being able to buy in such a massive metropolis for around $1,000 a square meter, honestly, is quite a steal if you take a long-term view on things. The population of the city is growing, the country is youthful, people are hardworking, there's a large industrial base. Sure, there's a current account problem, the currency is volatile, but overall, after some volatility, Turkey will end up on the positive side of things. I'm confident. I'll put it this way. Let's say you're sitting in the UK or in Austria or in the US or in Canada, and you're getting some very paltry returns on real estate. I mean, when you look at Western Europe, mostly you get what, after you've paid all your taxes, everything, 1.5%. Here, you can easily double your rental yields, easily, if you invest in the right neighborhoods by working with an agent like Keith, who actually is a buyer's agent and goes and finds the deals for you, as opposed to someone just selling you nonsense for a fat commission. It's a bit of a no-brainer. I would say, sell your Austrian real estate giving you 1.5%, or parts of it, not all of it. It's important to stay diversified. And yeah, go for, yields that are 2 times bigger, and invest in a country that is likelier to give you capital gains over the long run. It's objectively a no-brainer to add to your diversification by buying smartly into a city like Istanbul. So I've written a number of articles on Turkey, on real estate in Istanbul. I have quite a few videos that are up on the topic as well. So do feel free to check out my website, thewanderinginvestor.com. Subscribe to the private list. It's free for all the latest investment, residency, citizenship analysis as I travel around the world. And if you're interested in Istanbul real estate, do have a look at some of my other videos. Keith and I go around and check out a few apartments, and for each apartment, he gives us how much the apartment cost, how much the renovation cost, the price per square meter, the rental income, and so we get to exact yield calculations, which is very useful because it's generally hard to get that sort of information. And in most cases, especially in Istanbul, when you go see agents who try to sell you new property, they'll just be telling you complete nonsense.